Joe Flacco looked bad on Sunday, but the Browns cannot change quarterbacks right now. I'll explain coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Starting Dillon Gabriel right now would be flat out irresponsible for the Browns based on what they've told us, essentially. If yesterday is the sign of things to come, then nobody is safe. And if Shedeur Sanders really told the Ravens not to draft him, I don't really blame him. I do want to thank you for being in every day at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed. And I understand why people are already saying that they're comfortable with the organization, moving off of the Flacco experience, going to Dillon Gabriel, making him the starting quarterback. But here's the thing. The Browns can't possibly be comfortable with that just yet. And this, again, I want to be clear because I said back early on in training camp of the preseason or leading up to that stage of the season that if the Browns had decided week one that one of these guys, Gabriel, Sanders, whichever, was ready to start week one and had prepared them to be the starter throughout most of training camp of the preseason, I would have been okay with that. And I kept talking about how you got to get a good read on these guys. You got to be able to, see where they're at so you know what you're doing in 2026, particularly at the quarterback position. But now you're here. You're at a point right now where Joe Flacco was the starting quarterback of this team. They decided to do that, where these two rookies, based on what the Browns told us, weren't ready to start just yet. And that they kept telling us that they're taking their development very seriously and they want to put them in the best possible positions to be successful and they want to develop them and they're focusing on that and they're prioritizing that. Okay. And if that's the case, then we have to think logically about this. I understand how it looked on Sunday. I understand that Joe Flacco looked slow. I understand that he made some really bad blunders that cost the team. I don't think that was the entirety of the issues. The interception was bad, and that sort of started the floodgates opening. But special teams was bad as well, as I talked about yesterday. There was a lot of things wrong with yesterday, but also there wasn't a lot of guys getting open, which speaks to the talent level of this Browns team as well. There's an issue there. There is a flaw in the Death Star in terms of what they've built here for a roster, and so that plays into it as well. The offensive line was bad yesterday. There was a lot that went wrong to contribute to Flacco's performance. And no, he wasn't good. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he was good, but we have to think about this logically. And if the Browns have told us that they're prioritizing these guys' developments and they're taking that seriously and they're going to be patient and they're not going to put them out there so that they can be in a bad situation and look bad and play and have, play bad. And they're trying to make sure that they have success in this league. And they told us just 2 weeks ago, by the nature of how they set this depth chart up, I guess even further back than that, because they named Flacco the starter at the end of the preseason. But if they just told us that like 3 or so weeks ago, how am I really supposed to believe that now 3 weeks later, all of a sudden they're good to go and they're going to put them out there in a situation, by the way, that is not very advantageous to success? And that's the bigger point here. This team is not going to start Dillon Gabriel heading into a matchup with the Green Bay Packers, who have one of the best pass rushers in football in Micah Parsons and are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And then you got to think about the games that follow, because that matchup doesn't make sense for Dillon Gabriel, and Kevin Stefanski already put that to bed. I also think too, you still have to sort of sell to that locker room that you're trying to win. And if you go to one of the rookies, especially after the disaster that Sunday was, where you get blown out and absolutely boat raced by one of the best teams in football, and you look non-competitive late in that game, that's almost like a waving of the white flag if you go to the rookies. It's almost like all right, we're moving into evaluation mode. We're already on to 2026, and you can't signal that to a locker room full of guys like Myles Garrett, who's pissed off and just said after the game on Sunday that he was embarrassed. Joel Bitonio, Denzel, those guys aren't going to stand for that. And you can't lose this locker room if you're Kevin Stefanski, which we'll get to coming up, So you got to be careful with the way that you play this year. So we already know they're not moving to Dillon Gabriel before this Green Bay game, which is probably the smart move because you don't want to put him out there against that team of all teams. But then on top of that, like, guys, we knew what the deal was when Joe Flacco was named the starting quarterback. We knew that this initial stretch of the season is a gauntlet. We knew what that entailed. It doesn't get easier even beyond the Packers because you have the Lions who just put up 50-plus points on the Bears this past weekend. Like, you think that team's not going to – and their defense looked dominant. Back to being healthy finally. Like, that defense looks phenomenal, and their offense is back to clicking again. You don't think – You think they want to put Dillon Gabriel out there against that Lions offense, this juggernaut offense, and this defense that's now back to playing at a high level because everyone's healthy? I don't think so. On the road, by the way, in a hostile environment. And then after that, you get the Vikings in London. You think they're going to start a rookie, his first start of his career that they invested a third-round pick in and they felt like was their guy in this draft class? You think they're going to thrust him out there and put him out there under center when he has to travel halfway across the country to go to London in a different time zone and play? That doesn't add up. That doesn't make a lot of sense either for a team that's apparently prioritizing the development of these guys. And then you come home from London and you go to Pittsburgh, which has been a house of horrors for the Browns over the years, on the road, hostile environment. Like, none of those games, I can look at that entire stretch of games coming up, those first 6 games, and say, if the Browns are telling us that these guys weren't ready yet and they were going to be patient with what they do with them and they're trying to develop them the right way, none of those games really make sense to put them out there. It just would not be smart if they're trying to set either of these rookies up for success to play them during any of these first 6 games. And that was the deal with Flacco all along. I get why you watch that game on Sunday and you're like, I'm good with Flacco. I'm done. I don't need to see it. I get why people are bringing up, well, Kenny Pickett would have done better than Joe Flacco did. I get all those conversations. I do. I would argue that I don't think Kenny Pickett would have done that much better when the offensive line is getting manhandled. I would have argued that Kenny Pickett wouldn't have done much better when the receivers are all covered up. Maybe he would have given you something in the run game. That's about it. But I think this would probably still be a similar result or similar results. And let's face it, they should have won week 1. If they win week 1, I don't even know if this conversation is as hyperbolic as it is because, yeah, you got blown out. But we kind of expected that could happen this year at times for this Browns team. We also, though, expected it to be more competitive. And that's the bigger problem that I took away from yesterday was that they were non-competitive in this game entirely. And as I said on the post-game show, it looked a lot like 2024 to me. And that's what's problematic here for everybody. Not just Flacco and his job status, if they're going to move on to Dillon Gabriel, not just Bubba Ventrone, who I talked about the other day. Everybody's in trouble in terms of their standing in this organization if that's what you're going to get throughout the season. And we're going to talk about that some more. But on a larger scale, this is not the time to pivot to Dillon Gabriel just yet, even though I would have loved to see them start a rookie from the start of the season and just lean into the idea of rebuilding. But they've told you that that's not their plan. And if they're trying to really set these rookies up for success, you would have either had to get them ready to start the season and felt good about it and just rolled with it, or you get them ready when you know that there's an opponent on the other side that's the most comfortable situation for a rookie. And to me, that's probably not till week 7 when a bad Miami Dolphins team that could be on the brink of firing their coach before anybody else fires a coach here in the next couple weeks. When the Dolphins come to town, 0-2 to start the year themselves, and you're at least at home, that feels like the best situation of these next 4 games to actually put a rookie out there and set them up for success. And you can get them ready how you feel to get them ready. I think ideally the Browns wanted to maybe get to the bye week before they have those conversations, but at 0-2 and maybe no end in sight to this skid, they might not have that luxury. I do think a change is coming sooner rather than later. I think yesterday probably changes the math on that to a degree, but I don't know that we're going to see it until after these first 6 games. And I honestly think that they can probably sell to the locker room like, hey, we just got to get one and get on a roll here, and maybe we can start turning this thing around because the season's not completely out of reach at this point. Yesterday was bad, but you're 0-2. And teams and players and all these guys, like they always are going to talk about like the possibilities of if we get 1, if we get 2, maybe we can start getting on the right track here until they're mathematically eliminated. I'm not saying they're going to wait that long for a QB change, obviously, but I think they can sell themselves on like sticking with Flacco for at least this first 6 games for all the reasons I laid out, and that it would be irresponsible to put a rookie out there in any of the situations that kind of come with these next 4 games. And then we'll talk about maybe a quarterback change. So as much as people might want to move on from Flacco, I get that Gabriel had the nice drive at the end there. Granted, it was against the Ravens backups. It was garbage time. I think you got to wait a little bit longer here before we get to that point, because the Browns just aren't going to do that and put him out there in a situation where he struggles or doesn't have success if they're really prioritizing the development of these guys, especially Gabriel, especially, who's the guy they took first in the draft in terms of the quarterbacks that they took, and the guy that they've gushed about since his arrival here with that supercomputer brain that he has. After yesterday, as I said, nobody should be considered safe in this organization. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly, my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking projections like Josh Allen for more or less than 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. And this year, Prize Picks is offering max discounts, which give you opportunities to cash out, easy opportunities to cash out, I should say. For example, next week, they have a max discount, Patrick Mahomes, 0.5 passing yards. Obviously, you play more there, and you have an easy win in your pocket. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So I know on Sunday's post-game show, I talked a lot about special teams and Bubba Ventrone, because I was at a point with that unit where you could listen. It's cost them games these first 2 weeks. That's undeniable, and it's a problem. It's become a serious problem, that unit in particular. And I thought it was, to me, I felt like starting there made some sense, even though I know there was other topics that needed to be discussed, and I tried to get into those things. But I started the show with that, and how his seat, Bubba Ventrone's, is probably the hottest on this team. But I'll say this. If yesterday is a sign of things to come, and if yesterday is going to continue, is going to start a trend of how games are going to go for this Browns team this year, then nobody, not a single person in this organization, aside from Jimmy and D. Haslam, because they're the owners of the team and they're not going anywhere, should be safe. Not one. Nobody. And that's understanding, by the way, that I've said this and I'll continue to say it. My belief going into the season and 2 weeks into it is that I don't think Jimmy Haslam wants to have to blow it all up and fire Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. I don't think that is his plan as things stand right now. I think he wants to give them a chance to dig themselves out of the quarterback situation they're in after trading for Deshaun Watson. He talked so much throughout. I mean, it was reading tea leaves here, guys. He talked so much about patience and the idea that it was going to take time to find the franchise quarterback and dig themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in. You guys, you heard these things. You know what I'm talking about. These are the quotes and the lines from Jimmy Haslam throughout the offseason, at the owners' meetings, at other points in the offseason, even during training camp. The idea that they need to be patient, that they know they have to find their franchise quarterback, that they're going to take their time. And I do think that is a sign of maturity and growth from Jimmy Haslam in terms of owning the team. He's gone away from just making the emotional decisions at times and just doing what he thinks his gut is telling him to do in a spur of the moment decision. And he's trying to show some patience and some grace in giving guys time to actually build something here. And I do think he likes Kevin Stefanski. I do think he likes the culture that's generally been put in here, where they went from a team that was 1-31 in 2 seasons and couldn't win to save their lives. And all of a sudden now you're talking about playoff appearances 2 of the last 4 years, 2 of the last 5 years, and, actual success on the football field that this team hasn't seen in a while. But that's also not a reason to just stick with somebody because they've done more than the previous regimes and the previous coaches and things that have been here before. The fact of the matter is Kevin Stefanski in his last 20 regular season games is 3-17. That's not good. That's not good enough. That's not going to get the job done in any way, shape, or form when it comes to winning football games. Now, maybe adding that 20th game in there is unfair because that takes you back to the 2023 season when you lose the Bengals and you weren't playing all your starters. So even still, we're talking about a team that's 3-16 in the last 19 regular season games over the last 2 years, last year's full season and this year. And the results just aren't there. And at some point, the Bill Parcells line of "you are what your record says you are" has to come into play. Like I see the comments. I know people think I was trying to scapegoat for Kevin Stefanski yesterday, and that wasn't my intention. I promise you that was not my intention. I was not trying to bring up the special teams and Bubba Ventrone and talk about how his seat is even hotter than Kevin Stefanski's because I'm trying to make excuses for Kevin Stefanski to keep him around. I admittedly like Kevin Stefanski as a coach. I think he is a good offensive mind. I think right now there's limitations to what he can do because his roster isn't very good. I think those are all facts and just truths here, not me trying to scapegoat for him. But I also recognize that at some point, you run out of things that you can say to argue why Kevin Stefanski should still be here if the team is going to lose continually, and especially if they're going to lose the way that they lost on Sunday, because that was inexcusable. And like I said, if that's going to be the trend, if they're going to go out this weekend, they're already 8.5-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel, at home, by the way, against the Green Bay Packers in week 3. If they're going to go out and roll over like that again and get absolutely destroyed by a superior opponent again and look non-competitive and be embarrassed as Myles Garrett described, that nobody should be safe in this organization. Kevin Stefanski shouldn't just be safe because, Jimmy Haslam wants to see it through, or Andrew Berry shouldn't just be safe because Jimmy Haslam wants to see this through and see if they can find a new quarterback. Like, no, at some point, the results do have to speak for themselves and the failures have to fall on the head coach that's at the helm here. So as much as I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach and a good offensive mind, and I would like to see him get a chance to actually draft and develop a quarterback of his choosing, which maybe people think that's Dillon Gabriel. I would say if you didn't take him in the first round, it's probably not really the guy that they're trying to turn into a franchise quarterback, but we'll see how this season goes, I suppose. I'd like to see it. I would love to see this work because I don't like turmoil and I don't want to see this organization have to go through another rebuild and all those things. But at the same time, the results are the results, and it's the Bill Parcells quote of "you are what your record says you are." If his record is at the end of the season poor and they're getting blown out and guys are quitting, and that's the number one thing I always say about a coach's job security, by the way. It's how their message is being received in the locker room. Are guys still bought in? Are guys just quitting on the coach in the season because things have gone awry? We're going to find out a lot about that from this team moving forward. And if week 3 is a spitting image to week 2 and they get boat raced again, then yeah, we're going to start to have even more concerns and questions about whether or not mentally the team's going to be bought in for the entirety of a 17-game season. There's going to be a lot of questions there. It's not going to be an easy thing to talk about and discuss because it's those are legitimate questions. He might lose this team. He might lose this locker room if they're going to roll over the way that they from this point forward. I hope that's not the case, but you can't make it at some point. You just someone has to pay. Someone has to own the fact that this team hasn't been good enough, and that that the results in the field are putrid, even with the talent discrepancy that they have. And you don't just get a pass for that either. So ultimately, like I said, I think Jimmy Haslam prefers to keep things intact here when it comes to at least the head coach and GM combo, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. But because he's talked about patience, but his hand would be forced if more of yesterday, I should say, awaits the Browns throughout the rest of the season. If Sunday gets ugly, if the game in Detroit gets ugly, if London gets ugly against a Vikings offense that is very uninspiring right now, if a game against the Steelers gets ugly, hell, if you lose that Miami game, the one I'm circling as maybe here's where you start Dillon Gabriel because you finally have a matchup where you feel like, okay, maybe this is a good opportunity for our guy to come in. We're at home, inferior team, all that. And you lose that game, and if it's bad and it gets ugly in that game, all bets are off all bets are off. So I think the plan right now is to keep everything intact. But this season and the results on the field and what the final record looks like and how guys are playing at the end of the year, whether or not they're still bought into Kevin Stefanski's message, is all going to dictate how this ends. And I know that it's easy to sit there and say, like, well, if Kevin Stefanski got fired, he'd be added to some coaching staff to be an OC or be a new head coach within minutes. And that might be true. But you can't just keep a guy around either because you think that somebody else is going to scoop him up and maybe win in that situation, right? Or like Stefanski has success somewhere else. Like, you can't live in your fears in that way. If things get as bad as they were yesterday for the next 15 games, someone has to pay for it. All bets are off, and Stefanski's going to have to own the fact that some of these failures do fall on him at the end of the day. And we'll see what happens. But yesterday was bad. And you can't lose games like that consistently. Yeah, if it's a one-off and they're competitive the rest of the season, fine. But if there's more of that to come, nobody's safe. Stefanski, Barry, nobody. An interesting Shedeur Sanders report emerged pregame yesterday. And whether it's true or not, I don't blame him if he actually did what was reported. I'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice. Your barista, your barber, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom, but not everyone is the right one when it comes to real support. That's why BetterHelp is here. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience, BetterHelp helps you find the right match, someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's challenges. I've caught myself venting to my friends in group chats, chatting with friends just in general who mean well, but they're not therapists at the end of the day. And it's nice to talk to them, but having someone trained to talk to actually helps you get the results you need as you attempt to make changes in your life. BetterHelp is also flexible. You can join sessions online, from home, or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Hey, Locked On Browns fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use the limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true. I get it, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or even an e-gift card for Amazon or other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time. 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers may vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. So there was a report that came out pregame before kickoff on Sunday between the Browns and the Ravens from ESPN. Adam Schefter had it, that essentially the Ravens were planning on taking Shedeur Sanders at pick 141 in the draft back in April. Same round, 5th round, 3 picks sooner than he went to the Browns at 144. And that when they called Shedeur Sanders, he basically indicated to them, don't draft me. I don't want to go there because I don't want to play behind Lamar Jackson. I want to go somewhere where I can play immediately. And while I get that this is going to become fodder, and already has become fodder for people to continue piling on Shedeur Sanders and saying, this is why he slid, and this is why people didn't want to draft him, and all these different things that have been talked about with him and the narratives around him and all that. I get that that's going to be the main thing people take away from this. And listen, I can't speak to how him and his team handled the draft process in general. It does seem like there were some things that maybe they could have handled better and maybe would have led to him being drafted sooner or earlier on in the draft and maybe gone to a different opportunity. Who knows? But what I can say is, if this is true, I honestly don't blame Shedeur for making his intentions clear at that point in the draft. And I get it. At that point, like, you should just be grateful that someone's trying to draft you. I know what people are going to say. Just he should have just let them take him and been grateful that he's getting a chance to play in the NFL. But here's the other thing. Shedeur Sanders, in his heart of hearts, believed that he was the second best quarterback. I'm not even going to say that. He believed he was the best quarterback in this draft, and that him and Cam Ward were the two best guys without question, and that he was going to be going near that top 10 at least, same range that Cam Ward obviously went. And he believed that throughout the draft process. He thought he was going to one of those first couple teams in the draft. He ended up going to one of those first couple teams in the draft just way later on than anybody expected. And he thought that was going to be the case. And there was talk about how he should have been at least a day 2 pick, no later. And he ends up sliding to day 3 and going to the 5th round. But I can understand, as you're sitting there watching that all play out on draft weekend, and you're frustrated and you feel like you've been sort of snubbed to a degree, and you feel like you're being disrespected and people maybe misunderstood you or whatever, where a team calls up and they're like, listen, we're going to draft you here. What do you say? And you get to, come to an organization like the Ravens and whatever. And he's looking and he's like, well, this team already has a franchise quarterback. And the chip on your shoulder that would develop over the course of the draft and draft weekend about wanting to prove people wrong and how you feel slighted and all that. I can just picture this kind of happening in somebody's mind as they're watching their slide on draft weekend from being talked about as a first round pick, even at least a second or third round pick, and then not going until the 5th round. That would make somebody feel some type of way. And so I can understand where maybe that call gets made. And he, at that point, he's kind of like, well, what the hell do I have to lose at this point anyway? I can either go somewhere else, not get drafted, and then sign wherever I want to sign, and maybe I actually have a chance to compete. But at that point in the draft, like, why does he care? Or why would he want to go to a team, rather, that has a franchise quarterback where he clearly is going to want to go out there and prove, like, I was misdrafted. Like, let me show you what I can do and have a path to maybe playing sooner rather than later, because that wasn't going to happen with Baltimore. Like, I can understand where he's coming from to a degree, where it's like, what do I have to lose at this point? I'd rather go somewhere where I can prove people wrong and show what I can do than go somewhere where I'm just going to be buried in the depth chart and never get that shot behind Lamar Jackson. I can understand those thoughts. I can understand why it's probably a bad look in the eyes of some people, but I also kind of don't blame him if that's how he felt in that moment. If the report is true, I can understand, and I kind of don't blame him if his thought process on it was just like, at this point I've slid so far. Does it matter what's it matter if I ruffle some more feathers just to make sure I go somewhere where I can actually show people that they didn't understand me or they misunderstood me or I was misdrafted and prove people wrong? And I think he's kind of been on that mission since he got here. He doesn't like to talk about it. He certainly didn't want to talk about it after the game yesterday. He was asked directly about it and basically said, I'm not even thinking about that. My mind doesn't go back that far. I'm just focused right now on how we can get better as a team and what happened on the field today. I'm not talking about this, whatever. Fine response, whatever he wants to say. There wasn't a denial in there, so maybe it did happen. I don't know. And so, yeah, if the reporting is true, I get why people are going to point and say it's more reasons why Shedeur didn't, people didn't want Shedeur or whatever. I actually do think, though, like, I don't blame him, because at that point, he just wanted an opportunity to actually go out and play football and compete and try to be a starter and show that the way he was perceived during the pre-draft process and the way and what led to him sliding wasn't the case, and that he's better than that. And I can understand why he maybe felt like a place like Baltimore wasn't the best place for him to land to sort of show that and do that and prove people wrong and make a statement in terms of his ability on the football field. Just, again, I get that's going to be a controversial thought for some people. They're going to think I'm crazy. And in a lot of ways, like, yeah, you should just be grateful to be drafted by any team. But at that point, given everything he had sort of thought was going to happen, given everything that had played out, I kind of understand why he would maybe shy away from wanting to go to a team that already had a franchise quarterback when he felt like he wanted to go somewhere and, compete and possibly play sooner and had an easier path to get to the field, because he has a chip on his shoulder at this point based on how that all played out. Also, throughout the pre-draft process, one thing that he made abundantly clear was that he embraces the idea of being on a team that doesn't have that guy and doesn't have the stability and turning that program or organization around, because that's all he did his college career. He did it at Jackson State. He talked about that. He did it at Colorado. He talked about that. And he talked about, I remember at the Combine him talking about it, wanting to do that in the NFL as well, with a team like Cleveland, with a team like the Giants, whatever it might be, where he would get this opportunity to potentially compete for the starting job, maybe be the starter, and then ride off as the franchise quarterback for the team at some point, and basically show like I can do this at any level. This is what I do. I'm a program developer or a culture builder, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I just think I think it's going to be perceived one way. I kind of see the other side of it though, where I can understand where a guy maybe didn't want to sit behind a franchise QB and wanted a quicker path to starting to sort of prove himself and be that guy on top of embracing, which he's talked, like I said, like he's talked about embracing this turning an organization around type. He has that mentality about him. And so I think something like Cleveland was probably a more suitable situation for him to a degree. And I can understand that thought process there, even though people are going to think it's a bad look. Anyway, thank you for stopping by. That's another episode down. And thanks for stopping by to talk about your favorite football team with me. If you like what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel if you're not subscribed already. The NFL season is here for the second listen. Make sure you get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, Madman, Roland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop with the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I'll talk to you again Tuesday. See you, Cleveland.